What's the way out of this? I mean, I know there's so many permutations, there's so many, I don't know how but I mean, how do we start to have this conversation to, end this? Because it's not as much as it's
true.
I think Nigeria has probably the biggest issue with this, even though, I mean, Fulanis are all over the West African coast, because I saw in the news, I think yesterday, they were having issues in the Ivory Coast as well.
And Ghana.
And Ghana as well. But how do we start to have this conversation to stop this?
To be honest, my sense of the herder-farmer conflict is that all the thoughts, all the intellectual recommendations are all there. I read a memo from a couple of Nigerians, including, Jibril Ibrahim, Atahiru Jega, some well-known academics, who sat and wrote a memo. It's about 14 pages. And they said, these are the problems, these are the issues. There's no easy solution, is my understanding. There's a short-term solution, which is maybe to really go back to our grazing reserves, which apparently we never completely gazetted them. That's a temporary solution. Long-term, even these gentlemen, these intellectuals were saying, long-term, we should be looking at ranching. It's no longer sustainable. Our population has changed. We're moving from 30 million Nigerians in the 50s, 60s to 190, something 180. So there's climate change to deal with. So there's long-term issues. We're not the same people we were 50 years ago. So for people who are saying this is a way of life for the herders, understandable. But times are changing. Yeah. Life has changed. Our planet has changed. And if it's not sustainable anymore, then we should do something about it. But for me, that's one hand. One hand, I really think we know what the solutions are. We just don't have the political leadership and the will to do it. So that's a different question, which for me should be a campaign issue in 2019. Yeah. We must be asking governors, not just, even legislators, what are you going to do about this issue? Part of what is wrong with how we're managing the herder-farmer conflict is our Land Use Act. Many people say that's one of the worst pieces of legislation we've ever had.
It's shocking that it still exists.
Exactly. So can we make this a campaign issue? We don't want legislators who are going to go back to National Assembly in 2019 who are not going to talk about these issues or do something to change them. So for me, let's use this opportunity. Let's not waste this opportunity. Let's ask the hard questions in the run-up to 2019. Yeah. Let us make sure that we have leadership that can actually deal with the problem and will show us how they're going to deal with the problem.
Yeah. Very unfortunate, but you've pretty much led me into why you're here today, which is, of course, politics and 2019. And there's a lot to talk about in the political end. And I want to start off with a quote, which is by you. So just
be careful what you write.
Listen along with me. It says, PDP cannot change the change for the same reason APC cannot deliver change. Both parties cannot give what they do not have. There might be a few within the parties who genuinely want things to improve, but by using the current party structures, they compromise and disarm their vision for making the difference that will count. Explain this to us.
Okay. So I wrote this around the time PDP was holding its convention last year, and they were saying, oh, they're going to change the change, change was the slogan of APC, yes. And now they're going to change the change. And I'm like, no, you're not.
Find a different word, first of all.
Exactly. We're even confused about all this change. Let's find a different word. But for me, it was like looking at their convention and the faces of the people that emerged through the National Working Committee, i.e. Secondus, who used to be deputy and is now the chair. I just felt, but of course you're not going to change anything. If your leadership structures haven't changed, if the way that you voted for your officials in the National Working Committee also haven't changed, they are not really going to give us change. You see, our parties are fundamentally undemocratic. In the selection of the officials, in the selection of party candidates, in fact, a very interesting judgment came out last week where PDP was told to repay a former aspirant 4.5 million naira for his primary fees. Why? Because no primaries held. And so the court said, stop anointing candidates. If you're not going to have primaries, don't have primaries.
And don't let people
run. Don't collect money from all these people and then not even have primaries that are transparent and fair. So for me, that's what I meant, that if we look at the way our parties are run, it will give us a very good clue to what kind of candidates are going to emerge from the process and whether we're going to have any meaningful development. Because if you find that people who are selected, appointed, anointed through an undemocratic process, they don't feel they owe me and you anything. They owe only the party structures and the people who put them in power anything. Yeah. And that's why no matter how many times we play ping pong with the faces, one person moves from PDP to APC, from APC to AMPP, it's the same way they all behave. Yeah. So for me, that's why I said that we need to be more mindful of...
You've run for office in this country, and I mean, there was a saying that you can't fix things from the outside. You have to be on the inside to fix these things. When you join these political parties, do you see any conscious effort by anybody within these parties to try and, change the way this works?
I have to say it was a real eye-opener, honestly, and not to plug my book, but everybody should go and read Love Doesn't Win Elections. No, because even trying to be a party member tells you a story about the kind of parties we have. Have you tried to join a party?
Yes, I have.
Did you join? Was it easy? Maybe because you know you're a celebrity, so there's different rules. There's different rules for you. But normal people, first of all, the first challenge is trying to find out where that office is.
First of all, yes.
That's the first challenge.
True.
Then when you get there, some people will say, who sent you? Where are you from? What kind of question is that? You should want party members who can pay dues and add to the finances of the party so that you have money to do activities and programs. But instead, the preferred model of all our parties, pretty much since the 60s, is let's have a few godfathers, now the governors or the president, who fund the party. Let's have this no list of members, just some vague people, you know, who we can call to be delegates, and these delegates are transferable from one party to another party, and let's hold primaries that don't really count. All these things build up into the election so that by the time me and you are happy with our PVCs on election day, you know, waving it around and saying, oh, we're going to vote out this and vote out that, 80% of the battle for decent leadership has already been lost because we're only getting what the parties are giving us. And how many people are part of those parties?
So why then do people keep insisting, oh, people need to join political parties? What then are we going in there to do? What's the motivation for a young Nigerian to become a political party member?
For me, it is several things. It is what I just said about this Chike Madueke, the story about the Anambra. If you're not a party member, so me and you can know from my book and from the experiences we hear about, for other people share, that the parties are not democratic. But if we're not party members, we have no right to sue them, as Chike did. When, you see, the parties are not going to change themselves without any sort of pressure from inside and outside. We've been putting pressure as civil society for years and years, you know, telling the parties, you're not democratic, clean up your act. But it hasn't worked. They don't really have any incentives to do that because it pays them. What might work is what Chike Madueke did. Go into the party and as a party member, force them to start changing. Yeah. But you see, I can't sue. If you're not a member of PDP, you can't sue them because they didn't hold primaries properly. Only a member can do that. If young people join parties, several things happen. They're there as part of the conversations. If they're having ward meetings, they will be there. They will add their influence. Many more of them might emerge as delegates in the process, and so there'll be more of them who are maybe making that selection. When I was doing my primaries, I had delegates who couldn't write. Let that sink in. The primaries are not where you use ballot paper. For the primaries, it's just pieces of paper where you write names on. So if you have a delegate that cannot write, how is that delegate going to know whose name to put on it? Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes. So that's the opportunity for young people to go into the parties with a sense that we want to make the parties more democratic and then use their numbers and their force to force the parties to make that change. There's
a popular notion, I mean, by a lot of people within our age bracket that, oh, these are fathers and our grandfathers have ruined this country, and until they all die off, things cannot move. Oh. Did you find that in those political parties, there were young and youngish people also being a part of this system?
In fact, it was a real eye-opener. I realized that our political industry is generational. So I met fathers whose older sons were in the system, who were grooming their younger sons. So make no mistake about it, nothing is going to die out. It is a system, it's a process, it's a culture. And until that changes, whether we have young people or old people coming into that structure, we're going to keep getting the same results. Think of it as a sausage-making factory. Whatever goes in is going to come out in that shape. So let's not make any mistake. Even when the old people die, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be rude, but we had an elder Saraki. Don't we have a younger Saraki? Do you understand? We had our Governor Bello now of Niger State. His father too used to be a governor. Are people noting that they're replacing themselves? There's an industry and there's a generation that's ready to maintain that industry. So waiting for them to die out is a very silly strategy. The strategy is to go in there and force them to change, or from the outside. So we need pressure from in and out.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break now.
Okay.
When we come back, we'll zero in completely on the 2019 elections and find out what Ayisha thinks about the candidates as possible winners. We'll see you guys in a minute.
So let's dance now, it is my turn.